Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod. Alan Quinlan alongside me. As always, well actually not as always, but he's back involved this week. Of course, you're Alan. Wouldn't have you on the bench for too long. This Thursday afternoon, 24 hours out, a wee bit longer than that, Ireland's next fixture against Wales. We were chatting there just before we were recording. You think it's like a semi-final actually of the Triple Crown if they want to go and win it. They've made a lot of changes. We'll get into that in general. What do you make about having the rest week? Because it's been different with the fallow URC. Does that affect preparations in any way?
No, I think the new format is good in the sense of 3 games on the bounce. It's attritional. It's a new scenario. You normally play 2, have a week off, then play another, have another week off, and then finish with 2. I think it's good. We'd 3 weeks in a trot, weekend off, and now we can look forward to two brilliant weekends. Hopefully, it starts with Ireland on Friday night against Wales. Then there's a very interesting one on Saturday. Obviously, they're all interesting at this stage when you go to round 4. But obviously, Scotland play France in Murrayfield in the first game on Saturday, and France have been the standout team in the first 3 rounds. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But there's a feeling that maybe the Scots might cause them some problems. And then England have probably their own pressure to deal with in the sense of, losing those 2 games, the last 2 games against Ireland and Scotland. And we've seen improvement from Italy and quality players throughout their team. So they'll cause England some problems, or certainly fancy it. So there's a kind of a subplot in every story. For Ireland, it's about trying to get build on what they did in Twickenham. It'll be very difficult to replicate that kind of intensity and emotional high and energy. But I think we saw vast improvement in the accuracy around their breakdown and their accuracy around passing, pressure they were putting on the opposition, really excellent defence. Particularly early in that English game when they stopped England getting, scoring tries and getting any sort of momentum going. Wales, on the other hand, then themselves, really good performance against Scotland, came up short, switched off, I think, for that brilliant, quick thinking from Finn Russell for the Darcy Graham try right after they got a penalty to put themselves in a nice position in that second half. They just James Botham. It's very difficult, and I'm sure it's a very frustrating one for him, turning his back and not being ready for that. And they conceded a try, so they could have won that game against Scotland, Wales, and they keep going. They'll fancy it in Dublin, and they'll believe that they can go and cause an issue. So there's a story for every team and every game that's going to happen. And we got our under-20s then on Saturday night, which is, I think I've said this, we both did the commentary for the England-Ireland under-20s from the Rec a couple of weeks ago, and that was one of the most enjoyable commentaries that I've done.
You're with me, no?
A little bit, but I just thought...
I didn't think that was going to be the right
answer.
No,
of course,
but I had to go.
It was part of it, yes. But no, the second half was just a pleasure to watch the performance. A little bit unexpected with respect to them because they're up against a very powerful side, and I thought...
but Andy Farrell referenced that, and so did Sam.
Yeah, and it does. And
started.
I played in the Irish squad. I've been in Irish teams when we've looked at the women's results or the under-20s results or even an A game the night before, back when the A games are on. All those things give you a little boost and give the group a little lift, and it creates a positive vibe. So yeah, it's not going to solve your issues and get a performance guaranteed from you the following day, but it gives you a lift. And I think it was a positive start to that weekend for Ireland, because I think the first 2 weekends, and the coaches have all referenced it, as they're trying to, they haven't really kind of noticed a little bit of a negative narrative. And look, I think when you're in a group like that, you're trying to focus and get better and concentrate on your own stuff. That's understandable, but the reality is, lots of people talking about a decline. If you go back to that first weekend and, Thursday night in Paris, concerns, worries. France were very good, but Ireland were poor. Great fight back night after, the A game in Limerick against England. That was very disappointing. And then the 20s the following night and against France. So you kind of three your teams that you're looking for a shot of optimism or brightness from. They all lost. And I know you can't base it on one weekend, or you can't, we go to Italy then, and I always knew that Italian game was going to be very difficult, and I said it in the build-up. You've got to work incredibly hard. They're a very well-coached side, and there's a number of Italian players who would get in most sides in the world. Menoncello being one, I think Cannone in the back row, Zuliani. I'm not saying they'd be guaranteed starters, but they'd be definitely an attractive proposition to many top club teams in the world and international teams. The front row, Fischetti, Ferrari, outstanding power and scrummaging ability. So there's Italy are different, and a little bit flat coming out of the stadium that day. And look, expectation travels with this team, given where they were a number of years ago, and so that's where we're at. And what happened in Twickenham was just, you look at someone like Jamison Gibson-Park, and you think after Paris, and he was obviously. It was a very difficult situation against a quality opponent away from home, and France have shown where they're at really at the moment. Question marks about him after that game. He 5 missed tackles.
Well, he was left out for the Italy game. Yeah, starting
5 missed tackles.
But he also said he was hurting. What a response!
Inaccurate box kicking, and just reminded everyone. I've just even watching people in New Zealand and different journalists in South Africa, England, all over, and you see the online response. People talking 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10, outstanding, world class, one of the best scrum halves in the world. He just reminded everyone. So it can change very quickly, and I think the coaches and the players themselves, you've got to try and believe that when you're in a group in that situation. So I think there's a lot of positives there, in a sense of we're even seeing with the selection now. There's
well, you talk there, Alan. 5 changes this weekend. I actually just want to run through it. I thought it was an Ulster team at the start.
Well, it is great, but genuinely, Stuart, the reality here is the reality here is I'm a very, very passionate Munster man. I have been all my career. Since I've retired, you come out of that bubble and you start working in Ireland games, and you're going on tours and seeing this. A different sort of perspective. That's not to say that, I would love to see more Munster players. I think it's fantastic to see the Ulster players getting rewarded. We want to see that. We want to see more Connacht players. When they won the URC in 2016, there was 5-6 of them got on that tour to South Africa. It was brilliant for Connacht, and they deservedly so. The same when Munster won the URC in 23. They're a couple of more pushing their way into selection for that World Cup. So Ulster getting rewarded, and there's still a conveyor belt of good, excellent young players and in Leinster, and more coming through. I've watched schools games this week. The standard is phenomenal. So back a couple of weeks ago, when all this doom and gloom was there, I actually said to a few people, well, you should go to some of these schools games and see.
Crazy.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now, South Africa is probably the premier of schools games when you see the amount of...
Blackrock St Michael's on the 17th will be all right, though.
Yeah, St Mary's.
St Mary's,
yeah. But I'm just saying that there's plenty to be positive about, really, and sometimes we react a little bit too negatively, and that can happen. You have to kind of call it as you see it, and but for the Ulster guys to get rewarded now, and look, being an Ulster man, Richie Murphy has had a tough couple of years. He took over. It took him a while to implement his strategy, to change his squad a little bit, to get some younger players through, to get them playing well, maturity, all that kind of stuff. They're not the finished article.
We're not, but you said, fans are pretty fickle. And towards the end of last season, everyone's like, is it the right direction? And then 6 months on, himself, Mark Sexton, Willie Falloon, got the under-20s team which they did so well in, and they're just gelling, and the attack that they're bringing in just throughout the game, they're impressing.
Yeah, well, look, I think Ulster fans are happy to go to the stadium and watch them and see them attack and have a go, and some of those players are getting rewarded for that, and that's good to see. So 7, and I'm sure Craig Casey won't be happy. Nobody wants to, even though there's a lot more rotation nowadays with international teams.
We didn't even actually better go through.
You better name them out. So
Osborne, Ballacoon, Ringrose, McCluskey, Stockdale, Crowley, Gibson-Park. From 8 down is Doris, Timoney, Conan, Byrne, Ryan, Furlong, Kelleher, and Tom O'Toole, which is be quite fascinating to see how he gets on that side of the scrum. Tom Stewart, Milne, Clarkson, McCarthy, Van der Fleer, Doak could get a debut, which will be a delight for him and his family, and Farrell and Kieran Frawley. Andy Farrell has used a lot of players over the last 3, which will now be 4 matches. Before it was very steady Eddie. Yes, he's been forced his hand with injuries. Is there a selection in your eyes for the weekend, but also down the line with Australia in the World Cup?
Yeah, I think in his defence, I've said this a few times, he would want players really performing with their provincial sides and making it really difficult for him and forcing some change and selection conundrums, if you like. I think he addressed it in November. People, had asked the questions about, will this squad get us to the World Cup and the age profile, and very simple terms, there wasn't people that were left out of the November squad that you think, oh God, they're really hard done by. But I think what's happened this time is he's definitely rotated the team. If you see some of the changes from France to Italy to England, and now, someone like Tommy O'Brien and Cian Prendergast starting in France and Paris. We saw the impact Tommy O'Brien made against England. He's not in the 23 now, but
and also to have a winger on the bench, I'm not sure he was given enough credit for that, of how it worked out.
Yeah, well, I think it's the utility scenario of probably having Frawley and Tom Farrell gets rewarded, so he gets a shot. So there's definitely been a number of changes. It's really good to see Tom Stewart. If Kelleher or Sheehan gets injured, he's third choice, gets a taste of the warm-up, being involved, a little bit of a confidence booster for him. The same with Nathan Doak. There's a bit of support there in the sense of McCarthy, Van der Fleer, who have experience.
Nick Timoney, first Six Nations start-off.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's he gets rewarded for his impacts off the bench. So a little bit extra pressure on him in the sense of he's doing it from the start now, and what will that look like? But so there's a couple of guys, Cian Prendergast and Tommy O'Brien. If they were selected next week for Scotland, people would now go, well, yeah, they're excellent players. So we've seen a little bit of rotation, and I think, having Edward Adogbo getting capped as well. I think we may not see him this week and next week. It's highly unlikely, but at this point, but he's got a taste of that. I think he's got to go now and just get the required fitness level to play a top-class international. But I think he's an incredibly powerful physical athlete. So they need to probably manage him now because he's come back from really long-term injuries and getting up to speed and getting a taste of what international rugby is like. Your fitness levels have to be just top-notch. And he's had a couple of breaks and he missed November, obviously, with was a concussion for him. He missed that trip to to Chicago. So, players are getting rewarded.
He's even got Bryn Ward in that squad, to see how it's all going
he came
about.
In trained as well. So, I think there'd be if Ireland it's unbelievable, Stuart, because if Ireland beat Wales, which with respect, the Welsh probably expected themselves that Ireland have enough to get a result. Scotland's a very, very tricky one and could go anyway. They're such a dangerous side. But if we ended up beating Scotland and Wales, Italy and England, the end of the Six Nations then, it would be, well, we've brought this player through, this player through, this player through. There's 5 or 6 guys now who haven't been familiar faces, and maybe in the summer add one or two more, and then suddenly your whole kind of view going to Australia in 2027 is different. It just goes to show you.
How can that change so quickly?
It's just sport, and you just have
But that's why we love it,
but
isn't
you
it?
just have to accept it. So look at Gibson-Park is getting written off over in France, and I was getting concerned in the sense of, all their performances have dropped a little bit below of where they're at. They look a little bit incohesive or not as connected as we've seen in previous years when they've been very dominant. So you hope that the performance and the victory in Twickenham was a bit of a line in the sand, and maybe that turning point is there. If you go back to 2021, I think...
over the top, Ireland-England, is that what you mean?
Correct.
Keith Earls?
Up to that point, Ireland, there was a little bit of a pressure scenario happening. Andy Farrell, we were on the back of, he was probably 12, 14 months into the job. The World Cup ended disappointingly. He'd been involved for 3 or 4 years before, 4 years before that. And there was a few question marks about where this team is going. They found a performance, an energy level against England. In Keith Earls scores a try, Jack Conan scored a try on the other side. They had a great win against England. The glass suddenly became half full, and they started to build and, get more consistency into their attack, into their performances, and their win ratio was very high, and it culminates in series win in New Zealand, and probably a Grand Slam, a championship win, wins in South Africa, so some brilliant results. So hopefully this is one of those ones that, and he is going to have to do with some new players along the way. That is the reality. There is going to be some change.
Just as you mentioned, Andy Farrell, we spoke yesterday, and there's plenty of chat about his contract after Australia. He arrived firstly in Ireland 2016 with Munster, and then went into the backroom staff with Ireland defence, and then up now, as we know, progressed so well. Where do you feel this Andy Farrell opportunities for Ireland going forward, or the situation? Did maybe a month or 2 months ago think after the World Cup it's a good time in professional sport to be involved with a team for 10 years?
It's the same for a player.
But now there was links to Saracens, the Suns there. He talked about knowing the owner. I actually got the impression that he wants to stay on. I don't know where I'm getting that from. It's the way he was speaking. He's going to have a chat obviously with David Humphreys down the line. Where do you see Andy Farrell in 3 years' time?
First of all, I think he's done a fantastic job with Ireland. He's a very inspirational character. He's well got, well liked. He's very honest.
Is there a better coach out there?
There's probably coaches as good or better coaches. I don't know, because you probably can judge it better if you're a player and you've worked with multiple coaches. I've never worked and been coached by Andy Farrell, but by all accounts, his approach and his knowledge and his coaching ability is second to none. We've heard so many English, Welsh, Scottish guys talking about it, the impact when he was actually coaching on lines tours as assistant coaches. So of course there's people of different strengths, whether it be forwards, backs, skills, attack, defence. There's so many elements to coaching. But I think he learned a lot from Joe Schmidt, I think, and particularly that run and the consistency with Ireland, their success under Joe. And I think he's a lot of experience at that level now. He's obviously head coach of the Lions last year in Australia. And same for players and coaches. Things can change very quickly. One result can change the feeling. Sometimes coaches or players have feelings that maybe it is time to move on, that the opportunity is right, and you have to look after yourself. It's professional sport, but I hope he stays. And maybe at the start of the Six Nations there was a little bit of maybe it is time for a little bit of change, whether but that's being other personnel in the coaching setup. Sometimes we all have our time, fresh faces, all that kind of stuff. So he'll be very aware of that. Like, if Ireland were to lose against Wales Friday night or lose to Scotland next week, it's back to, it's three
Don't
steps
be
forward.
saying that.
It's 3 steps forward, and it's
You're turning
five
into one
back.
of us,
No, I'm
Alan.
just giving you examples of where it can happen.
No,
if
it's
they
fair.
go to Australia and lose and heavily against Australia, or Japan in Australia or New Zealand, it's just week on week. You've got to deal with that, and you do
But I
have to.
suppose that's their job as well.
Absolutely, you've got to block it up. But ultimately, I think I think he's a very inspiring character. He's done a brilliant job. We've a small pool of players. I think we do punch above our weight, and the reality is we shouldn't. The expectation is very high, and that comes from, and that's a good thing. You have to expect and set your standards high. So, does he kind of have to reinvent himself? Well, every coach does along the way. They have to change their tactics, their approach, their coaches, the way they play, the way they view the game. That happens along the way, and the best coaches can do that because you have to adapt along the way with different personnel and different people that you work with. But he's done a brilliant job with Ireland, and I would imagine. So in simple terms, Stuart, if you have an offer to go to Saracens and it is what has been mentioned and there's that sort of money and the lure of working with your son, it would definitely be of interest. You'd have to listen to that scenario and get to a point where you don't just dismiss it. You say, right, that's on the table. Then you've got to listen to what the RFU want. You've got to look then, for me, if it was me...
Is his agent a genius, Al?
No, but it's a reality. I think that, of course, he'd be in demand. Like if Ireland lost X number of matches and he's listened to a lot of this stuff and, he doesn't see the team doing great in the next post 2027 because he's there till then, well, then you kind of say, look, my time is done here. I can, it's time to move on. Sometimes we all need a new challenge. Change can be good. But I think if there's an offer on the table from Saracens, this is hypothetically, they've denied that there's an offer, but the links are there. You then, I think he handled it well and said, we'll sit down with the RFU and we'll see where we're at. That's just business. It's 2027, his contract is up, so he's either going or he's either staying. It's no rocket science here.
What happens if the Saracens or the club offers a couple of 100,000 more?
Well, then you've got to decide, is it worth it as regards the financial thing? I believe Andy Farrell would look at the rugby programme in a sense of where this is going to go, because with all due respect, he would be well paid in the game, has been well paid. It's not like a young fella going from a 20 grand academy contract or a 15 grand academy contract and getting 200 grand to go somewhere. It's not that scenario. I know there's money does make a difference.
And also the other side is if he could get Ireland to a semi-final or final in a World Cup, first man to do it, be some box tick for him.
Yeah, and there's probably a bit of an itch to be scratched in a sense of the last, I don't know, will we get to that level of where we were at? Look, it's whether people believe it or not. I think most rugby people in the world knew Ireland were at a very high level going into that World Cup, and for maybe unknown reasons, and sport can be cruel, New Zealand, and you're playing against an opponent in the quarter-final has such a rich tradition of producing performances, even though they weren't at the same level that we've probably seen them in previous World Cups. They could have easily won that World Cup. So it's just the way the draw didn't help. But it was the best World Cup squad I'd seen. I was involved in 3 and covered a few on commentary, but that was the one that was there. So maybe, look, it depends. I'm going around circles here, Stuart. The reality is here, the coach looks at what's coming through, where he can see Ireland going, and that tickles his fancy, or else he looks at Saracens and says, well, I go there. There'd be multiple offers. I think there'd be other clubs that come in the mix. I hope he stays. I hope we see a lot of Andy Farrell, but you never know. It'll be down to results in the next period of time as well.
Well, time will tell. It would be remiss of us not to touch on Wales here for a couple of moments. James Botham's named at open side for his first start in the Six Nations. Alex Mann at blind side. Aaron Wainwright at number 8, who is clinical. He's robust at number 8. Dan Edwards back at fly half because Sam Costello's injured, and Ellis May is selected on the wing as they both make their third appearances for Wales in this championship. They looked a lot better against Scotland. Matt Sherritt was saying earlier this week that they want to scare Ireland and really go after them. Can you see them causing what type of problems? Like how worried should we be, or not at all?
But I think their overall game, their attack and their intensity and their accuracy was much better than what I've seen. I think you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to build confidence and keep the ball alive and move the ball and be brave in the way they play. Because in this period, they're not the biggest, most physical team that you're going to come up against. But maybe in Ireland, they'll probably look at Ireland and say, well, we can match these guys from a physical point of view. They're on the back of horrendous run of results, really, aren't they? I think
they've only beaten Japan, haven't they?
There's 3. They've beaten Japan twice, isn't it?
Nice.
And the Barbarians in a game as well. So they've 3 wins in 26 Test matches.
You've done your homework again.
Well, I did cover that game last week, so it was 25, 3 and 25, and then they lost to Scotland. So, yeah, look, it's been really difficult. I think the Ospreys winning at the weekend and Cardiff winning on Friday night as well, and that gives them a little bit of a lift, maybe from the regional teams there. There's so much uncertainty. There's a lot of good players in this team. I think their bench depth isn't where other teams would be. So fitness levels, maybe there's a couple of players who struggle if the pace gets very, very high. So they're not. I think we've had our own debates and issues around 10. I think there's been a lot of chopping and changing since Dan Biggar has gone as well from Wales, and what an iconic figure for him to lead with Sexton. Yeah. So they've had plenty of issues in the performances, and they haven't been able to physically batter teams. I think if they get time and space, their attack is very good. I like their, I like Joe Hawkins, Eddie James in the centre, 2 big, powerful centres. So if they get enough of ball, Ellis Mee is back in the team for Ireland. I was surprised he wasn't there for Scotland. Josh Adams is brilliant player in the wing as well. I genuinely think Lewis Rees-Zammit is out of position at fullback. I think he's a winger.
Okay.
I just say get him the ball, let him.
But they've been
go
at this for a wee while now.
Yeah,
so
and I suppose there's
it.
just a little bit of uncertainty sometimes when he gets the ball. So there's a couple of players there, and if they get their continuity going and their pace, and we saw that in the game in Cardiff last year, they looked like really, really cohesive and good, and caused Ireland some problems. And so I think they can cause Ireland some problems here in Dublin, but I just think that power aspect and that tempo and intensity that's required to win these type of games hasn't been there. Maybe they'll find it. Maybe they'll find their special result to turn the corner. They're going to beat someone soon.
There should be some going if they turned over Ireland.
Yeah, well, you've got to. I think they'd have to keep going for rock solid for 80 minutes, and with all due respect, I don't know if they can do that, but I think they can cause Ireland some problems. So it depends where Ireland are at. If Ireland can get to a really good level here in their own detail, I think they'll be too strong for Wales. But and that's based on the evidence. That's not trying to be disrespectful to Wales. So their back row is very good. Alex Mann, James Botham, Aaron Wainwright, they're full of energy and cause teams, make it really difficult for the opposition. So Plumtree got injured in that Welsh games or in that Scotland game. So their loose forwards are really good. So we'll see. I think Ireland have to just worry about themselves now and try and get their level right.
Brilliant. We've got 10 minutes left, and I think this is going to be the game of the weekend. France-Scotland in Murrayfield. Something is saying in my brain, probably not very much, not too many brain cells in there, Alan, but that Scotland can really put it up to France. And why couldn't they shock them? Are they good enough?
I think they have the quality to cause anybody problems.
France can also win the championship at the weekend.
Yeah, I think we don't have a Scottish team yet, but it'll be out shortly. But you look at the French selection, it's just that if you look at the 2 centres that are back in there, Mofana was out injured, Deportier was injured as well. They were outstanding against Ireland.
And
the two centres that came in, two youngsters.
And
wow.
Gaitan.
Yeah, just brilliant. So, Adesogbe has been wonderful. Ramos, Bielbury, Jalibert's back in there. Yeah, so it's, and of course Dupont. So that should scare any team. But I'm still not convinced about the French pack in a sense of, I'm still a little bit uncertain about the two props.
Just around the park or in the tight in the scrum?
Probably a bit of both. I think they're very good players around the field, but just they wouldn't frighten you as some of the old French props might have. That sounds a little bit disrespectful. They're wonderful footballers around the field, and the pace that Galtee has a team playing at now, they're very, very useful, and they were very good against Ireland. So I'm not suggesting that this is a weakened side, but they struggle big time against the Springboks, and I think it's their only Achilles heel is maybe their own set piece. We had, essentially two new props in Lockman and Clarkson there, and Ireland's scrum held up well. So I think it might be an area that Scotland could put some pressure with Schoeman and Fagerson, who we probably will start. But yeah, Guillard in the second row and Charles Olivon as well have been essentially their two back rowers playing in the second row. But it's an indication of trying to get these.
And Miafu, just to let everyone know.
Yeah, but he's on the bench again. But I think it's just the dynamism of both those players in the second row.
Olivon has just gone to another level, hasn't he?
And so they've been superb, and Francois Gros and Jalanche, just different level. Jégu. So they have a great balance to their team, but it's not the most physical forward pack that you're ever going to meet. I know when they bring on Mafu and Weenie Antonio, if he was there, it adds, a different kind of a scenario there. But the continuity, the pace, the tempo, it's at a different level. So for Scotland to have a chance, I think they've got to, look at maybe the Ireland game and see. The contestables in the air are really, really important, because their transition off any sort of turnover or winning a ball back from a kick is phenomenal, and that's where they do their most of their damage. So Scotland have got to make sure they get parity or even win that battle, and it makes a huge difference when you look at Ireland when they went to Twickenham, because the box kicking is a big part of the game. Get their set piece right, and then Scotland and Finn Russell and Tupolatu and Hugh Jones, they're Kyle Rowe, outstanding players. So they have their own attacking threats as well that can really cause teams problems. But for me,
if you had your lucky dip this week, are Scotland going to perform?
I think so. I think they'll make a fist out of this, a real one. And I think, but if you were asking me to choose, I think France. They're at just a level now. They've good composure. They don't panic, and they find a way. And I'm basing that on maybe coming to Dublin last year, and Ireland take the lead in that second half with Dan Sheehan's try, and you think, oh, Dupont has gone off, and they showed a lot of maturity, a lot of quality, outstanding quality in probably a 15-minute period to score 3 tries, and then they just turned the whole thing on its head against Ireland. They're capable of great things, this French team, and I think they'll probably just have enough to beat Scotland. But looking forward to it. It should be a cracker. Yeah,
hopefully it is as good as we've talked about. And then on Rome, Italy against England. Italy have never beaten England in the Six Nations. Steve Borthwick has pretty much changed all his backline, a lot of it anyway. Finn Smith is in. Atkinson, big day for him. In the centre, Freeman's there too. He's in the wing. What are you thinking, Alan, about England? They were the team 12 in a row, and now
I picked them to win a Grand Slam at the start. So
they're 10 out of 10 now. They've gone to 4 out of 10.
Yeah, I think well off it in Murrayfield and well off it in Twickenham against Ireland. And maybe they were... Look, I think the win against the All Blacks in November and probably wasn't just the win, it was the manner in the win and the power and the set-piece dominance around scrum time. And, they won that game well. They made New Zealand look very poor. Australia was tighter in a sense of Australia caused them a few problems.
Just checking Freeman is at outside centre. Yeah,
they won. It was probably on the back of November and maybe just a surge in some of these young players coming through and a different approach and all that kind of stuff. So look, I thought it'd be a France-England Grand Slam decider at the end, but Scotland, who have caused England serious problems in the last number of years in that fixture, got a very, very dominant win and really exposed them when you hold on to the ball against England. Attack, be brave, build big continuity, you'll find gaps, and Ireland did as well. So, very disappointing from them. The first game up was utter dominance against Wales. I think they'll sort themselves out for Italy. I think they're better than what we've seen the last two games.
If they don't, what happens?
Huge pressure on Borthwick, given the expectation coming in, and it could be, he could be under pressure for his job. I think England, bar last year, I think the previous 3 or 4 Six Nations were very disappointing. They finished, third and fourth in a few of them, way down the pecking order, even before Borthwick's time, the last couple under Eddie Jones. So, no matter what happens between now and the end, if they were to beat Italy and beat France, it's still a very disappointing Six Nations for them. Okay. Because they've lost
3 out of 5.
Yeah, and I think the expectation was coming in to at least win 4 and be, the way they were being talked up. I think not just they weren't really doing it themselves, but
Borthwick in the launch. I'm not saying he said week 5.
Well, he was targeting.
France,
he was targeting the Grand Slam and all that.
Believe.
Yeah. But they need to be a lot better. They were very, very poor. They've gone back for Finn Smith, which is, George Ford was the hero in November, and the first game against Wales, all good, and the results drive these changes as well. So Mitchell being out of the team, Alex Mitchell is a brilliant player, but I think he's excellent at all the box kicking. He loves that, slowing it down. It's part and parcel of what his big strengths are. His kicking is superb. But I think Spencer, even though he kicks a lot, even when he plays for Bath, I think there's probably a little bit more zip and energy and speed of passing in his game. So maybe they will be a little bit more expansive. Murley coming in the wings, a very good player. Atkinson, centre. Freeman back to the centre. I'm not so sure about it. I know Ollie Lawrence is out, injured, so it's amazing. We talk about depth. There's not too many 13s jumping out of select, up, putting their hand up for selection in England either. But it's still a good team. But
I would say Italy will be, looking at that team, delighted they've made all these changes.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think they'll have to... they'll see some vulnerability there, and if they can front up and be really physical with the English forwards, they've got a chance of causing them some issues, and I think they will. I think it'll be tight. I'd expect England to probably get over the line, but Italy will really fancy this one.
Alan Quinlan, thanks as ever, and don't forget on Saturday we have the double header of Italy against England in the afternoon, but before that in Murrayfield it is Scotland against France. Thanks for always watching and putting your comments on YouTube. See you again soon.